Top 8 dinosaurs, go.
The little things that ate the little girl in Jurassic Park 2.
Campies?
I don't know.
I think they're campies.
They were very small. And they ate the fuck out of that little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Brachiosaurus, Stegosaurus.
That's it. Okay, good.
Tyrannosaurus.
Are you just naming
Rex,
the ones you know?
Velociraptors. That thing with the spiky tail.
Right.
That thing. That dinosaur from the movie Dinosaur. That thing.
Oh, that made my head hurt.
Triceratops.
I got a headache immediately.
I don't know.
You just start naming random dinosaurs. Which ones can I remember? Pterodactyls. It's the least subtle of all dactyls. The greatest thing as a kid, because all the models for dinosaurs are fucked up.
Indominus Rex.
Ooh, that's actually a really good one. All the models were fucked up growing up. Everything I know about dinosaurs is completely wrong.
Yeah.
There were a couple of them that were in the books that were really popular that aren't even dinosaurs anymore.
Yep.
They just put the bones together in like a random order. So if you wonder why older people have a lot of confused dinosaur opinions, it's because we don't know any. Were pterodactyls OP? I'm actually convinced that they are. They even made a Pokemon out of one.
They did?
Somehow it was a flying rock type. I've never been more confused about that. It's called Aerodactyl.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him.
Right, yeah, we had to find one for the...
Yeah, it was terrible.
And they never showed up anywhere.
No.
Pokemon Go people already know my pain. Let's do it. Tearzoo!
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now.
Oh no. Oh no!
That's cute. Oh, it's Fall Guys.
This video was made in partnership with CuriosityStream. Flight is an ability which has been unlocked by a grand total of 4 separate factions in the history of the game. However, only one of these factions is no longer playable in today's version of Outside. I'm of course talking about Pterosaurs. Pterosaurs still hold the record for the largest, most powerful flying builds in the history of the game. So why is it that the Pterosaur build is absent from the current meta? Did they simply fall out of favor with the player base as players gravitated toward the newly added bird builds? Or were they outright banned by the devs? Well, first, let's discuss the Pterosaur build's introduction to the game. So, directly following the biggest mass ban of all time, the update that came at the end of the Permian expansion, the Archosaur faction gained access to 2 new classes. The one that garnered most of the attention was the Dinosaur class, and for good reason. Dinosaurs ended up becoming one of the most over-centralizing, meta-defining builds of all time. However, the other new class was the Pterosaur, which, despite having a less dominant role in the Mesozoic meta, was honestly an even more shocking addition to the game. Prior to the Pterosaur's debut, flight was an ability restricted exclusively to the insect faction. No vertebrate had been able to make a flying build work yet, and because of that, insects had gotten away with some questionable strategies, and hadn't changed much about their flagship builds in a long time. Pterosaurs were in the perfect position to punish the insect player base for their complacency. And on top of having a great matchup against insects, being able to fly gave them a reliable escape option during a meta where being able to escape meant the difference between reaching the endgame or getting one hit by extremely overpowered jaws. Now, while it is true that eventually Pterosaurs started investing a lot into the power stat too, when they were first added to the game, they were all far from gigantic. Initially, their base stats looked something like this. Nowhere near the power and size of their later builds, instead keeping the vast majority of their base stats allocated to mobility.
You can't catch me. You can't kill me. I mean it's just I'll shoot you when I see you, but what if I'm never where you are?
Despite having an HP stat about as high as a piece of paper, this strategy worked great. There were no serious aerial threats they needed to avoid, as the Griffin
class cannon.
League of Legends, Squishy.
Squishy, yeah. Mad squish, bro.
Dragonflies had been banned a few updates prior, and the birds of prey wouldn't come out for a long time. This meant pterosaurs were in the perfect position to diversify and test out all kinds of wacky strategies.
That looks
In addition to chasing down flying insect players, pterosaur mains also found that this small, agile playstyle also functioned great in the role of support class, cleansing the giant dinosaur players
That's
of
the same
parasites.
one like with the fish. They go in the other fish's mouth and stuff. Players looking for better XP rates could also opt for a fish-eating build.
although with higher reward, of course, comes higher risk. To mitigate this risk, pterosaur mains eventually started to actually put some of their points into HP and power.
Smart.
Normally this is a bit of a
Like their
gamble
little
since
feet.
larger size tends to reduce mobility. And while it did increase the startup leg for their takeoff move, they more than made up for this by gaining access to the soar ability, allowing them to fly for
Vicious
extremely
ass feet,
long
bro.
distances without using all that much stamina. Upon gaining this ability, some pterosaur players realized that a new playstyle had become available to them, the scavenger. See, when the cost of traveling long distances becomes lower, it actually becomes a viable strategy to search for rare but extremely high value loot drops. Like, for example, the remains of a defeated sauropod player. It might seem risky to bank on being able to find that level of loot consistently, but it's a lot less risky
Yeah.
than the alternatives, and when you can patrol an entire server, even the
And then you
rarest
can
loot
pick
isn't
and
that hard to
choose what
find.
you want.
Plus, them spending most of their time flying minimize the time spent close to danger. It's a good thing pterosaurs were able to spec into gigantism, because things were about to get a bit tougher for the smaller pterosaur mains. Their command over the skies was being challenged, as some of the dinosaurs had unlocked flight. Through an entirely different combination of perks and attributes, a new faction of the dinosaur player base had discovered a way to use an ability originally intended only to provide cold resistance in order to fly. This was bad news for the pterosaur mains who liked the smaller, more agile playstyle, as these
Really
new
like
avian
gliding?
dinosaurs were far better optimized for that niche, particularly in forest biomes. Their feathers were far less vulnerable to damage than the thin membranes that pterosaurs were using to
That
fly,
makes sense.
meaning that these new avian dinosaurs didn't have to worry about puncturing a wing when flying through a
make them
dense
go back.
forest or jungle.
Yeah.
Feathers also offer some blunt damage resistance, making any mid-air collisions less damaging.
Makes sense.
These avians were sorely lacking in size and power though, and so it was on that front that these pterosaurs opted to compete with them. Soon the larger scavenger/opportunist type build became the pterosaur's only viable strategy, as the avian player base had control over the agile insectivorous niche. This might not seem like that bad a trade, ceding control of a rather fragile playstyle to another faction, while keeping
Exactly.
control of a record-breaking niche never before seen in game. And for a while this was absolutely true. The pterosaur player base continued to thrive, scoring easy loot while still remaining out of reach of the overpowered giant dinosaurs. Unfortunately, those overpowered dinosaurs did end up inadvertently causing the downfall of the pterosaurs, because after an incredibly long run of dominating the meta, eventually the devs finally dropped the ban hammer. And this is where the pterosaurs' size came back to haunt them. The banning of the dinosaurs meant that those high-quality loot drops suddenly went from rare to non-existent. And with no way to keep up their huge food cost, giant pterosaurs became unviable. Meanwhile, the small builds like birds and mammals, which had been oppressed for so long by the giants they had to contend with,
They just
suddenly
started
had
out
free
here.
reign over
Yep.
huge territories. In particular, the bird's feather ability had its initial purpose suddenly become extremely relevant again, as the overworld temperature had cooled significantly due to the sun being blocked out by dust. Experimenting with new combinations of abilities is key to creating an innovative build that breaks the meta and gives rise to new dominance. And while the pterosaurs initially made some incredible strides in revamping the reptile class to exploit an open niche, in the end it was the birds whose adaptations won out,
Birds
usurping
reign
an already
supreme, man.
established competitor and gaining air superiority that is yet to be challenged even in the current meta.
So, yes and no.
The birds had the last laugh, bro.
Yeah. And they look better. Flying membranes are disgusting. The only membrane that is still works now is like in ocean builds, octopi and stuff like that,
And bats.
and bats. It's stuff like they have like fur and like flying membranes.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like giant things, like large
Yeah.
membrane things go, doesn't really work in the sky.
Right.
And it makes sense. Being able to being able to regrow your feathers is just honestly such
Yeah. Not having to worry about puncture wounds and stuff like
a
that.
lightweight, hollowed out things, bones and stuff.
But it is an example of a build that literally had to be banned.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's like in this thing I just watched for Odd Ones Out. He was talking about games,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, you know, they banned like the strongest games or the strongest cards in Magic the Gathering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. If you don't do it, it would. I mean, storks though, don't they kind of like fly like long distances, kind of like the same kind of way?
I don't know anything about storks.
I think they do the kind of same
That
thing.
They bring babies.
Right. They bring you children, and then there are a couple of different kind of scavenging birds.
Vultures.
Yeah, like vultures.
Buzzards.
And like crows, and they do kind of the same thing. Crows are pretty big, but not nearly the scale.
Well, crows are not big, but ravens are pretty big.
Right. So we don't know much about birds, but we put it together
We're
enough.
no ornithologists.
Dude, you slap my knee, I'll slap yours. Hope you all.
What if I like got that word wrong? What if like ornithology is like not?
We're gonna put the word up, and it's either right or wrong. See you guys in the next one.